It's finally time to cover the King of the Skies, a plane so well known even my final form was insufficient to cover its greatness. Today we're going to talk about why America no longer loses sleep over the Soviet Union, and it's because of this, the F-22 Raptor. President Teddy Roosevelt once said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." This is the big stick. The first fifth-generation fighter jet in the world, capable enough to scare anybody with any shred of sanity left, but also subject to enough glazing to put Krispy Kreme out of business. So let's take a look at what the Raptor is really made of, and who knows, maybe we'll actually find a few limits to the King's domain. The F-22's origin story actually kicks off in the late 1970s. Following Viktor Belenko's defection with a MiG-25 in September of 1976, the US would come to the realization that the much-dreaded Soviet Foxbat could be best summarized as a high-speed brick with wings. What they thought was going to be a major air superiority fighter actually turned out to be an interceptor with very limited abilities. So what do you do when you receive proof that you have just significantly overestimated your enemy? Right, you take one look at the F-15, breathe a sigh of relief, then look back at the miserable Soviet pile of disappointment and have a partial panic attack as you realize that you have just given your enemy a benchmark.
No times no divided by no to the power of oh hell no!
And upon recovering from that panic moment, America would make a fateful decision. Nobody beats our F-15 but us. Which by all accounts is a promise we took seriously, because there is zero confirmation of the F-15 losing a fight to neither man nor metal beast. So in 1981, the United States would establish a new classified fighter program, officially called the Advanced Tactical Fighter, under the codename of Senior Sky, and the military told the engineers to pull out all the stops. Requirements included supercruise, advanced and integrated weapons avionics, having a more powerful radar, AIM-120 AMRAAMs, and low observability, mostly called stealth. And here's the funny thing. This is 1981. The F-117 wasn't even out yet. The Nighthawk wouldn't secretly enter service until 1983, and America has already decided that hacking this beyond visual range combat game now requires additional cheat codes. Because in the span of less than 15 years, America's gone from making thrust sticks to thrust bricks, and now they're gonna make one invisible.
I affectionately refer to it as stealth mode.
And it would need it, because the intention of the Raptor from the get-go was to be first in line in a World War III aerial sword fighting contest and go full God mode on the other team to the blast of 7-nation army. So it really doesn't surprise me that the prototype development contracts totaled over $1 billion with a damn B. And given that this thing is supposed to make things go boom in the night and scare an enemy air force into staying on the ground, it's fitting that they also awarded these contracts on Spooky Day. On Halloween of 1986, the Air Force would hand out two $691 million fixed-price contracts. One went to the team of Lockheed, Boeing, and General Dynamics, and the other went to the team of Northrop and McDonnell Douglas. And based on the fact that most people recognize the first three names, and pretty much only us nerds recognize the other two, I think you could tell who got the prom queen. After completing the first test flights in 1990, the YF-22 Raptor and the YF-23 Black Widow II would go head-to-head in 1991. And on April 23rd, the Air Force would pick the YF-22.
So it begins.
Which a lot of people seem upset about in hindsight, because the YF-23 is thought to be better performing. It really wasn't. It had longer legs than the YF-22, but the Raptor was cheaper to fix. Otherwise, they were functionally the same in both maneuverability and stealth. So we know the contest wasn't decided by can-whooping capacity. It was decided by marketing. The Northrop team knew how to sell to smart people like engineers, but the Lockheed team, on the other hand, knew how to sell to politicians. They were aggressive with their flight demo in front of the crowd. The YF-22 had also gone through more test flights by the time the contest rolled up, and so the tech on board was more developed. More developed means less time finishing the job for production, which means less money, which means fewer questions from Congress. It also means they could oblige the demo judges liking it rough. During said demo, the YF-22 was tossing weapons out of its inside bays and pulling way crazier maneuvers than the Northrop team, which tried to sit back and be gentle like it was the first time. The Northrop team also straight up forgot that high angle of attack capability was important and consequently forgot to show it off.
That's gonna cost.
But the other reason Northrop didn't get picked was because the Air Force knew that being gentle wasn't actually Northrop's style. They were usually a lot more dirty. By this point in time, Northrop was just about done with over 20 years worth of scandals, having been caught giving out bribes and being investigated for mismanagement and cost overruns on the MX Peacekeeper ICBM and B-2 Spirit programs. They were also indicted for falsifying data on Air Force cruise missiles and AV-8B Harrier parts, pleading guilty to 34 different fraud charges in exchange for dropping 141 more fraud and conspiracy charges. If you're not catching my drift at this point, Northrop is a show, and Lockheed isn't. So if Northrop got the project and screwed the pooch again, Congress would have a lot of questions. And like I said before, nobody likes it when Congress has questions. So on August 2nd, 1991, Lockheed, Boeing, and Pratt & Whitney would be given another $1 billion in contracts to turn the Wrath of God into a fighter jet. And with the now 2 Bs invested in development, the Air Force would request 11 prototype Raptors and 750 production models.
Well, aren't we generous?
But it's not really a secret that we didn't get that many, so how did we get there? Well, it was a lot of small steps, the first of which was taken before the Raptor even won the contest. Back in 1990, the U.S. Department of Defense capped the annual production rates to 48 planes a year instead of going up to 72 later as they'd planned. They weren't even patient enough to wait for spawn camping, they just kneecapped the 22 in the loading screen, and when the game finally did load in 1991 and the U.S. chose its fighter, the Soviet Union collapsed.
Disappointed!
Now the Raptor is just the most overpowered character in the game, so the US devs made like most big games and decided the best way to compensate was to nerf it. In 1993, the DoD's bottom-up review cut the Raptor program total order down to 442 units, including test models. And after the kid finally flew in 1997, the US would congratulate him by cutting his total down again to 339 planes. In theory, Lockheed could have lowered the cost of mass production by finding export buyers, but that avenue got shut down, and when Congress passed Amendment 295 to the 1998 defense budget, laid out House Resolution 2266. This amendment stated, and I quote, "None of the funds made available in this act may be used to approve or license the sale of F-22 Advanced Tactical Fighter to any foreign government." Yes, you heard me correctly. America passed a law saying this plane in particular is not allowed to be sold to anyone but us unless we shove even more money into it later.
I have a plan, Arthur. I just need $2 trillion of a taxpayer stimulus.
And considering we won the Cold War, it's not like that was gonna happen, especially after the global war on terror started in 2001. The F-22 had only entered the baby-level production phase that year, which presents a problem because on one hand, F-22 good. On the other hand, it has less ground-pounding options than the Nighthawk. By this point in time, the only bombs the Raptor was fitted for were JDAMs. 2 of them. And that's it. A lot of people like to say this thing has the radar cross-section of a bumblebee. How about we talk about the fact that it basically stings like a pair of bumblebees? Once, twice, go home. In a ground-focused conflict like GWAT, the Raptor could have been canceled outright to save money for more direct unhealthcare utensils, which is probably why the Air Force changed its designation from F-22A to FA-22 in September of 2002. She might not be very good at pounding the ground until it begs for mercy, but that doesn't mean Congress needs to know.
Not a word.
But I'm guessing they didn't fool anybody except for Jack and shit, because after being approved for full send production and reaching initial operating capability in December of 2005, they put the name back to the way it was before. They also failed to stem the tide of reductions because in 2006, the Quadrennial Defense Review cut the F-22 order down again to just 186 aircraft and killed production altogether in 2011. Which honestly just feels disappointing, right? These are some Su-57 level budget cuts and they're going off in my United States. But I'll pay it no mind, because at the end of the day, the F-22 is made to say one thing and one thing only.
I'm about to end your f***ing life.
Because let's be honest here, America didn't buy 186 F-22s. They bought 186 small national defense budgets crammed into an airframe and hopped up on enough methamphetamines to take on an entire pantheon. This thing's primary mission is to make an enemy air force into an enemy not their force, using 6 AMRAAMs, 2 Sidewinders, and a Vulcan 20mm Gatling gun with 480 rounds. And it can sling up even more missiles outside if you prefer the Russian stealth approach to the regular stealth approach. Those radar-guided missiles get thrown around by way of an AN/APG-77V active electronically scanned array, or AESA radar, which was the most powerful radar in the world at the time it was released, and has an engagement range which is not formally disclosed anywhere. But a report released by Forecast International in October of 2012 that was sponsored by the US Air Force does tell us that it can detect closing aerial targets at up to 160 nautical miles and pick out ground targets at up to 80 nautical miles. Or alternatively, it can use its track while scan mode to track up to 10 different enemies
At the same
same time.
I know the Raptor was made to beat the F-15, but at this point you can't really convince me that it wasn't made to beat the F-14 too. And it doesn't even need 2 seats for maximum situational awareness thanks to its sensor fusion. Now that fusion is more complicated than what you get in Dragon Ball, but the long and the short of it is that for the most part, sensor fusion is just taking all the data a plane can pick up on, you know, radar contacts, incoming missiles, AWACS data, ground forces, flight performance, the like, and turns them into a picture book that pilots can read instead of having to take a math class in the middle of a fight just to figure out how to shoot somebody. Now, of course, the electricity for all that has to come from somewhere, and by somewhere I mean the engines. The F-22 has a pair of Pratt & Whitney F-119 PW100 turbofan engines that can crank out 35,000 pounds of thrust at full burn each. Just for reference, the SR-71 Blackbird's engines each put out 32,500 pounds at full burner, meaning the F-22 has more thrust than the Mach 3 Plus Blackbird. So the follow-up question to that is, can the F-22 go Mach 3? No. It can cross Mach 2, but not Mach 3, at least as far as we know. And that's probably got to do with the fact that the SR-71 is shaped like a serving tray with engines bolted on. It's nice and flat. And the F-22, while pretty, is still effectively a brick that just so happens to have enough thrust to fly.
Light and free flying as bricks.
However, what that brick can do is break the sound barrier without using its afterburner, better known by its corporate buzzword of supercruise. And while the engines definitely help it reach the Air Force's reported Mach 1.5 plus speed, it's probably more due to its wing. The cross-section of the wing, better known as the airfoil on the F-22, is made to be a supercritical airfoil. In simple terms, this is a wing made to counterpunch the shockwaves that try to form over the wings when you start busting down the sound barrier like the Kool-Aid Man, which technically makes it the successor to swing wings. See, the way people started engineering around those shockwaves that form over the wings was originally swept wings, but when they needed better low-speed performance, they swapped over to swing wings. I've got several videos covering how the swing wing works, so I won't go into detail here, but it turns out you can also beat the air into submission using the shape of the wing, not just its angle. You can actually design an airfoil to both delay the supersonic flow over the wing longer by making it thinner, and recover lift towards the rear of the wing to make sure it works at low speeds. These changes increase the plane's top speed and boost the wing's overall efficiency by almost 15%, all while tearing into the sound barrier like it's made out of drywall.
Oh, yeah!
And depending on whether or not it's supercruising, the 43,000-pound F-22 can reach a combat range of between 470 to 600 miles on its 18,000 pounds of internal fuel. That range can be increased to just over 900 miles with a pair of drop tanks and 8,000 pounds more gas, but I hope you're not planning on getting shot at, because the minute you put those tanks on, your stealth goes out the window. It also compromises your maneuverability, though it does have some of that to spare. The spicy googly eyes we like to call thrust vectoring nozzles stuck to the engines can direct the flow of thrust 20 degrees up or down, boosting your control at lower speeds. However, thrust vectoring does technically have a drawback. While you are turning faster because you're trying to use your plane more like a kite to change direction at the speed of Mach Jesus, you also lose more speed. This is true as a general rule, but it's even more so when the thrust vectoring is on, and for fighter pilots, speed is life. Luckily, the pilots can shut that thing off, and the tails will get that thing pointed where it needs to go anyways, because as one of its pilots aptly put it, quote, "The F-22's elevator is the size of an F-16's wing. When I make an input, I'm not making a request." Do you have any idea how gangster you gotta be to look at the atmosphere of the planet you live on? You know, that invisible shit literally keeping you from turning into a topographical rearrangement and respond to it with, "Did I stutter?" Although, to be perfectly honest, that is the F-22's response to literally anything at this point. 4 of them thrown against 4 times as many F-15s for a training match? Speedrun that fight in under 2 minutes. Got 2 Iranian F-4 Phantoms hunting down your drone because they can't see you on radar watching their every move? Slide up underneath them, look at their weapons, and then outright disrespect them with the words, "You should go home now." So far, it really has not mattered what the F-22 has gone up against. When it is allowed to fight the way it was intended to, it obliterates every opponent's hopes and dreams. And it was intended to snipe people from over 100 miles away while being borderline invisible. Yep, I know you were wondering when I was going to mention it, and it is time. The F-22's cornerstone technology is its radar stealth. The F-22 is custom made to make its radar return, called a radar cross-section, small enough that most people won't be able to see it before it shoots you. To be clear, it is not actually invisible. It is not a cloaking device. It is a delay tactic. Because the F-22 doesn't need to not not get shot at, it just needs to not get shot at long enough to take your head off first. But it's a fighter plane. It's too small to stop every single radar frequency ever, so it's made to prioritize the ones that let people shoot it. You can still see it with the other ones, you can still direct your Air Force to go say hello. But here's the thing, that's what the kid wants you to do.
Oh, shame for you. You activated my Alucard.
You can see this thing on a low-frequency radar array, sure. You can track its movement with it, sure, from the screen in the air-conditioned box you're sitting in. But none of that matters if you can't kill the thing. It's like a horror movie and you're that blonde cheerleader in the corner screaming that you're all gonna die. Because there's a certain amount of psychic damage you do to somebody by using the phrase, "a good defense is the best offense," to walk straight up to them and ignore their attacks like you're Neo while convincing them to say,
That's my exit.
and that concept is cool and all, but how does it actually work? Radar stealth is made of two parts. The first is something called planform alignment, where you give the plane a giant case of OCD and set its surfaces and edges to all the same angles. The other is taking it to the radar masseuse, who will infuse its skin with essential radar absorbent materials called RAM. This could be the materials the plane is made of, such as the paint job over the polymer panels or the tin oxide layers in the canopy glass, all of which make the plane super expensive. Seriously, the canopy alone weighs 400 pounds and costs over $200,000 by itself. And truth be told, we don't know how effective it all is. I can't find a firm estimate that isn't more debated than a presidential election. The sources I thought I'd found before seem to have disappeared, and for all the current ones, I'd need a degree in electromagnetism or something to interpret them. All I've really got for a point of reference is the Havglass 5 program, where spraying the F-22's RAM coating onto a clean F-16C is estimated to take its radar return down from 5 square meters to about 1.2. Add that to what I vaguely remember the numbers to be on the simulated F-22's radar cross-section without RAM, which put it at an average of somewhere around 0.7 to 0.5, and that translates to the effect of the paint dropping it to around 0.17 to 0.12, which is nowhere close to the popular 0.001 or whatever it is. But that's just the effect of the paint alone, and I don't think I'll know what the answer really is without knowing what the F-22's polymer panels are made of, and I don't think I can go looking for those without getting hit with the old
FBI, open up!
However, while the F-22's radar cross-section might be debatable, there are limitations that are definitely not, because the Raptor's biggest threat isn't the enemy. Its biggest threat is itself. The F-22 may be more than equipped to take on damn near anything it goes up against, but it is technologically ancient and about as mission flexible as a dude's furniture after looking at the wrong kind of pictures. First of all, Cold War aircraft are like dogs. If they live to be 20 years old, you better send somebody some thanks, whether it be to the man upstairs or to all those things that could have sent you to him. And yes, I said Cold War. Remember, the F-22's design process began in the 80s and was made with tech from the 90s. Let me put it to you this way. The F-22 was flying before Google owned their fucking website. She might be pretty, but she ain't new. And she's got some miles on her. I know the Air Force technically has 183 F-22s now, but they might as well not even have 150 because at least 35 of them are so run down they can be used for training, and that's all, and it's not like we can fix them for cheap. After Raptor production was canceled, Lockheed swapped the production lines out for the F-35, so new parts are not made at scale.
Oh, man, what are you doing, man? That's my bad.
The Air Force did look into restarting Raptor production back in 2016, but it would have cost so much they would have been better off making a whole new plane. And the F-22 was only made for 8,000 hours of flight, after which point it would need another small national defense budget to extend its lifespan like some vampire drinking a whole town to stay alive. Now, granted, by 2002 it was made public that the F-22 fleet hadn't even made it to half that much, which means, you know, I'm trying to tell you that while the F-22 may be hitting its midlife crisis, anyone who starts a fight with it is still going to learn why you should beware the old man in a profession where men die young. But even at half its lifespan, the maintenance difficulties are already compounding. This thing may have been designed for improved maintainability, but that does not make it cheap. Stealth is a very high maintenance partner. Putting on a new coat of sneaky paint alone means the technician's got to scrub off the old one in a climate-controlled hangar with hazmat suits on, giving them the nickname Martians.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex.
And the RAM isn't the only thing that can make the Raptor fail a stealth check. If the airframe goes through enough high-speed flight, the friction heating can crack the polymer panels underneath the RAM coating and permanently ruin the stealth profile. And then, if they're stationed in harsher environments, like the Middle East or near the seaside, sand or salt water just gets in those cracks and makes everybody's day worse, which, based on some of the pictures floating around, doesn't really have an easy or cheap fix. And speaking of fixes, something else they still haven't really corrected is the ordnance capacity. Congress didn't buy it when the Air Force tried calling it the FA F-22 because it still has fewer ordnance options than the F-117. If the Raptor's feeling spicy and wants to go plow the planet, then it has to trade out 4 AMRAAMs for 2 JDAMs. And if it isn't packing the to whom it may concern half-ton Halos, the best it can do is 8 GBU-39 250-pound GPS and inertially guided glide bombs. It does have that beast mode I nudged at a few times, but it's just for AMRAAMs and fuel tanks, and after all that's gone, the best it can do is sit around and act as forward command and control.
Now, Hawkeye, it's time to do your thing.
I'm out of arrows.
History has proven time and time again that platforms always have to flex outside of their intended roles. F-4 Phantoms would outlast even the dogfighting F-8 Crusaders in Vietnam and then handle more strike missions than any other strike fighter in the war. F-16s, made for air superiority from the get-go and modified into multi-role aircraft later, would handle the majority of ground-pounding sorties in Desert Storm. And when it comes to combat, the 22 ain't got none. All of the combat it has seen has been a World War I flavored blast from the past or training simulations that we intentionally lose. A balloon might count as a kill under the not-so-great war rules, but that's not really a test of combat skills so much as your ability to not embarrass yourself. If anything, the F-22 literally getting its cherry pop just gave the internet some more meme material. And when I say the training exercises are designed to make it lose, I mean they put on the 8,000 pounds of gas in the drop tanks and order the pilots to fight up close and personal where its stealth doesn't matter against multiple people at the same time. And once somebody finally does get a kill, whether that be a Rafale, a Eurofighter, an A-10, or even an F-A-50 Philippine light attack trainer, the government tries to cover it up, fails, and then the rest of the world starts hyping it up.
The one thing they love more than a hero is to see a hero fail, fall, die trying.
However, I think all that counter-hype might actually be the plan. I know that sounds like American copium here, but hear me out. There's a saying that goes something along the lines of, if you want to fool your enemies, you must first fool your friends. And Sun Tzu once said that you should always look weak when you are strong. I'd be willing to bet the US fails at covering up the F-22's losses every time, because if none of your allies believe that you have the king of the skies, neither will the enemy. It's literally the story of the boy who cried wolf. If you keep failing to prove something, nobody will believe it. Then when it finally does show up in its full unbridled fury, it's gonna punt you in the nuts so frickin' hard every descendant you would ever have would feel it if there was enough left of you to have them.
Why did he punch me in the dick?
That's not funny now, is it, Kakarot?
And considering it's made at least partially for dogfighting, you would think it would have something like infrared search and track, or IRST, where it finds a target by its heat signature. Or maybe a helmet-mounted queuing system, which lets your gaze literally melt metal by locking your heat-seeking missiles onto whatever you're looking at. So while the kid might be the most terrifying thing with wings since the Cretaceous period, it's also limited both inside and outside of its primary mission and slowly turning to dust. Which is an issue because while the Air Force had already planned for the Raptor to be retired by 2030, they don't have anything to replace it yet. See, the Air Force isn't getting F-35s fast enough, and the F-47 isn't going to be around until past 2030, and they are just now realizing they needed a contingency plan yesterday. And as the saying goes, a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. And for the Air Force, the best plan they have right now is the F-22. Not only because it's the best there is at what it does, but because it was actually made to do more than it does now.
Come on, you can do better than that!
See, back when Uncle Sam started nerfing the F-22 in the beta testing to balance their budget game, they also killed the rest of the development timeline. Turns out the Raptor was supposed to get things like the Chipmunk-style cheek radars the Felon has, and that IRST I just mentioned, which at the time was still new and relatively unproven technology. So, starting in fiscal year 2025, the Air Force began spending about $10.9 billion to upgun 142 of the King of Skies to being more kingly-er, with $7.9 billion of that sunk in by 2029. I'm going to say that again, but slower. The US is about to invest several countries' defense budgets combined into just under 150 planes. Now that's a lot of bees, because America, I guess.
Now we're talking.
And that high price tag makes a lot more sense when you start looking at that list, because it is a long list. We're talking stealthy drop tanks to increase range, a long-range IRST, the joint helmet-mounted queuing system, new developing missiles such as the AIM-260 and the hypersonic Mako air-to-ground missile, avionics upgrades to improve situational awareness, electronic warfare actions, and data transmission, a more NATO-friendly identification friend or foe program, navigation that works even in GPS-degraded environments, aka not giving a damn about somebody shooting out your GPS satellites, and improvements to maintainability and readiness rates across the board. They even want to add an open systems architecture, which would allow them to bolt on new software programs without having to rewire the entire airplane's code, which would also help if they decide to add programs for things like loyal wingman drones, you know, just in case it wants an audience when it finally gets to start playing Seven Nation Army. Supposedly the testing for the stealth tanks is already underway and started back in 2023, and if things are proceeding on schedule, then the sensor packs, helmet-mounted queuing system, and IRST systems are already being tested as we speak. However, none of those upgrades are officially known to be in service yet, so until they get here, we're still stuck with the original F-22, and we won't have this plane forever. But until they're gone, America's enemies will have something to think about. So in summation, if you're not America and you see a flight of these going overhead, don't worry, you weren't the target. Because the king doesn't come down from his throne to see the armies at the gate. He just waves his hand and watches them disappear. And if the world never does see the Raptor show its fangs, then I'll be the first in line to see the crown resting on its museum pedestal. Thank you for watching. We got merch and other links in the description, and if you like what you saw, please consider checking out some of my other videos. You might like what you find. Until next time, dismissed.